Hello and welcome to a review of Veronica Mars. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
And this week we're discussing the episode Poughkeepsie, Tramps and Thieves. This episode originally aired January 30th, 2007. Alrighty, David. So, number one song in America, it's still Irreplaceable by Beyonce because it's 2007 and it's a Beyonce song.
Yeah, yeah. It did end up being the number one song for that year for a fairly particular reason.
Yes. Alrighty, so for video games, we have a couple of things to chat about here. January 23rd, if you had a Nintendo DS, you could pick up, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Inuyasha Secret of the Divine Jewel.
Yeah, yeah.
Were you a fan of this particular anime franchise?
Well, it's kind of the case of, aside from the other traditional things that we were exposed to at the time, this was kind of the first big one that I was exposed to, and it was understandable, but also the case of, with its particular fan base, it's also kind of understandable of its popularity. But eh, I liked it well enough, but it's nothing that I go crazy for over. But nice well enough that it got some of the video games that it did.
Okay. Also, on the 23rd, if you had a PSP, you could pick up The Legend of Heroes 3 Song of the Ocean.
Yes, because I know this is a thing, but also the slight case of I've never touched this series.
Okay. And January 30th, if you had a PS2, you could pick up Rogue Galaxy.
Yes, with this particular one being interesting. Again, it's one of the particular ones I was intrigued with since picking up a whole bunch of PlayStation games at the time. But additionally, it's one of the ones that Level 5 also worked on. And they're a particular company I enjoy with their particular library of games they've made.
Oh, these are the folks who made the Ni no Kuni games.
Yeah.
I knew it. I was like, that company sounds familiar, but they've made a bunch of cool stuff. Okay. Okay, they made like the some of the Layton games. Okay. Oh, they made the Dark Cloud games, or at least the first one. Okay,
Hmm.
very cool. Moving on, still on the 30th, if you had an Xbox 360 or a PC, you could pick up Battle Stations Midway. Yeah.
Again, case with those particular ones, never much got into any sort of the ship battles or other sorts of things like that. Again, I think at the very most it was just the old board game version that I played, and that was about it.
Alrighty. And on January 30th, if you had a PS3, Dave, that game came out. It's this little game called Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic 06,
Yep. Yep. That game is.
which
Good.
I can't remember the specifics, but despite how bad it was supposedly even worse on this particular console. I'm not exactly sure of the reasons, but just with the technology and whatnot, it just had so many bugs. It was terrible.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that game is legally a war crime. Anyway, and finally, number one film in America, Dave. Any idea what it could be? It's kind of an interesting one for this time of year. Um,
Is it the case of something dethroned the thing from last week, which I'm very much hoping, though I also understand that if it hasn't moved, though, it would make me very sad.
no, Epic Movie has been dethroned, and it's an interesting choice. It's not something that would be seen as probably seasonally appropriate, but
Uh, uh, Something like that. Uh, Nothing exactly is popping to mind that either would be a little bit too far flung in the future and or off completely. Hmm.
it is a movie called The Messengers. It's a 2007 horror movie starring Kristen Stewart and Dylan McDermott.
Okay.
which is an interesting choice. I don't know why it got released in February, except that I think they were just trying to dump it because it got 11% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Mild sadness, though supposedly understandable because even with the mild information I know with horror genres and with their trailers and whatnot, I know nothing of this. Like, just looking at the list of things, the one other particular list that released a little while afterwards is more of a hooray, and this was brought into existence.
Yeah, I've never heard of this movie either, so. Alrighty, let us speak about this episode. Alrighty. So we start off with Veronica having lunch with Logan. After lunch, Veronica notices that the Hearst Lampoon's offices were egged. Weevil tells her that the dean's office was egged the same night, which Veronica relays to her father. Keith receives the police report of Dean Odell's death, but he doesn't find anything useful in it, namely because it looks like it was written by a bunch of 10th graders.
Mm.
Uh, Keith interrogates the Lilith House girls, who admit to egging his office but seem to have alibis for the dean's death. However, Keith later informs Veronica that Nish's alibi doesn't check out for the dean's car, but that it was likely true for Mindy's car, putting her under suspicion. While Keith is investigating the dean's murder, Veronica takes on her own case. Veronica is approached by Max, a student who helped Wallace cheat on his exam in the first semester. Max hires her to find his beloved Chelsea, who is engaged to be married in a week. Max says they spent one magical night together talking. He tells her that she sent him a text message about her impending wedding. Veronica quickly finds out that Max's friends hired Chelsea, a prostitute, in order to help him be more confident with girls. His roommate sent him a text message in order to help him get over her. Veronica hires the two prostitutes who might be Chelsea. One of them turns out to be her. Chelsea is incredibly happy to see Max, surprising both Veronica and Logan. As Max and Chelsea, whose real name is Wendy, make out on the couch, Madison appears looking for Dick. The next day, Wendy and Max plan their lives together, asking Veronica to help them make Wendy disappear from her former life. A battered prostitute appears at Logan's door and takes Wendy away, setting problems with their pimp. Leaving Max heartbroken, Veronica finds a stain of purple makeup on a towel, and she immediately deduces that Wendy conned Max out of $1,000. Veronica blackmails a judge in order to secure the $1,000 back. Veronica and Logan ask each other personal questions in an attempt to become more intimate, but it fails. At the bus locker at which Veronica instructed the judge to leave the money, she instead finds a note that tells Veronica and Max to get into a limo. In the limo, they find Wendy's pimp, who is actually a woman. She tells them that she actually did fall in love with Max, but she needed money for other reasons. Max immediately pays $10,000 in order for Wendy to be forgiven under the condition that he doesn't tell anyone about the judge. Unexpectedly, Wendy shows up at Max's door. Max and Wendy's relationship becomes difficult, and she leaves the following morning, claiming that he acted differently towards her after he found out about her occupation. Max pays back Veronica in $1 bills he received from Wendy, indicating that she had returned to stripping. Madison tells Veronica that she and Logan had sex when he and Veronica were broken up. Alrighty, Dave, what did you think of this episode?
One hand, with the story concept and whatnot, it still kept its story idea of working with the main case of the story and building up the questions behind that. But the additional subplot of the guy falling in love with the prostitute was actually fairly nice and whatnot, though there's been the multitude of stories over the last while that kind of work with the story. It was interesting to see the Veronica series sort of work with it from there, and especially with kind of throwing in the complications at the end with Veronica, with Logan, and Madison throwing her hat into the ring with causing issues. Just the ooh, oohs causing supposed issues with that. Just,
Yes, this definitely causes some issues for Veronica and Logan. Yes, I think it's a pretty good episode. It's pretty self-contained. There's not a ton of overarching stuff for the story, for the
There's
murder of Dean O'Dell, but there's a little bit.
No, there's the little bit. I think it's just the question of, would you count this as a bit of a filler episode, or would this sort of be enough to justify it being here with the stuff that it has to build up within the story and the ideas that the Veronica series sort of runs with?
I So the show does this a lot, where it'll have like a couple of like we'll move the main story forward a little bit, but then the episode is primarily about the case of the week. That's kind of what they've always done to an extent. So I don't think it's necessarily filler. There's not a ton that moves the overarching narrative forward, but I'm like, it's fine. And it's a good enough story that I'm not like, I'm not like, oh, I would skip this episode on a rewatch.
Yeah, in those sort of cases.
Yeah. I think it's a pretty good episode. Alrighty. If there's nothing else about this episode, next week we will be discussing an episode called There's Got to Be a Morning After Pill. Okay. In this episode, Veronica is going to aid a conservative Christian student named Bonnie in helping find who slipped her RU 486, which we will explain a little bit more next week, which caused a miscarriage. Meanwhile, Veronica becomes obsessed with Madison Sinclair after becoming enraged that Madison and Logan slept together while they were broken up. In addition, Veronica and Keith discover new information about Dean O'Dell's death. Yes, so some things are going to happen. Alrighty, if there's nothing else, I've been Paul.
I've been Dave.